He was absolutely apoplectic. And now, of course, the jig was up because the Bearcats knew that that was a phony order. And then, guess what happened to the fireflies? There were 3 Bearcats for each firefly, and they went nipping at the fireflies' heels all the way home to Magnificent. And apparently, when Canadian airmen were sharing a bar somewhere in the States, they would something, well, were you off Cuba back in 1950? Yeah. You guys weren't those firefly pilots, were you? So, you know, the story kept on going around and around and around. The Seafires. The second-hand Seafires, because now we have new fighters called Sea Furies. The second-hand Seafires went to the 2nd Fighter Squadron, 883, to the Training Air Group, and also to the last user was the Seafire exhibition flight. It was known as Watson Circus, and I'm going to do my 3-finger trick if I can. That 3-finger trick is that way. Okay. One of the pilots of Watson Circus was Bob Falls, that we already met. This is Clunk Watson. I don't know how he got that name, Clunk. But anyway, the sad part is that we're talking about the CNE in 1949, and the Seafires were putting on a lovely show for the people. But Clunk Watson tragically died because he had a head-on collision with another Seafire. And that was the end of Clunk Watson. But there were more Canadian Navy exhibition flights over the CNE in years to come. I'd like to introduce you to David Tate. You might recall I gave a talk on the broken wire a couple of years ago, and it was about a pilot by the name of Joe Sosnkowski. David Tate was a close friend of Sosnkowski, and through that connection I've met Tate on a couple of occasions. So he was born in Saskatchewan as a midshipman, got his wings. He flew Sea Furies from Maggie in 52. Obviously he was recognized as a really good pilot because he was made a flight instructor. That was a pretty good indication. He must have been a really good flight instructor because the Navy then sent him to England to take the Empire Test Pilots course in Farnborough. That was the #1 test pilots course in the world at that time. So he spent a year doing that. He must have become a really good test pilot because the Brits liked him so much that they asked that he could stay in Britain for another year or so, and he was seconded to the Royal Air Force at Boscombe Down, which was where the Brits tested new aircraft, not just Air Force aircraft, but naval aircraft also. He came back to Canada in '58 and was sent to VX-10, which is our one and only experimental squadron in Shearwater. And he ended his career after unification and all that silly stuff that happened with Paul Hellyer. He was the officer accepting the Aurora patrol aircraft, which we continue to fly today. So he did all the acceptance testing for the Aurora aircraft. So his logbook, 6,000 hours, 245 deck landings, 19 at night, and he just died a few years ago. Sorry. Wrong one. The superb Sea Fury. This was a fighter. David Tate admitted somewhat sheepishly that the Sea Fury was in fact his first love. We have to be very careful how he said that, but that was his first love. So it arrived with Magnificent in '48. We had 74 of them, and the Sea Fury really was the peak of the piston engine fighter development. So you start, the Seafire and the Focke-Wulf 190 and all these all these new designs contributed something to the ideas. So the peak of that development, what have we got here? Well, in that round nose is 2,500 horsepower, driving a 5-bladed propeller. It weighs 12,000 pounds. It has 4 cannon. It can carry 2,000 pounds of bombs. Has a speed of 470. It can fly to 34,000 feet and can fly 600 nautical miles. It served in the 2 fighter squadrons plus the experimental squadron. It was a good deck landing aircraft and certainly an inspiration to fly. In Korea, with the Royal Navy, Sea Fury shot down MiG-15 jet fighters. And in 1953, Canada was preparing its 871 squadron to prepare it to go to Korea. We were going to send a squadron of Sea Furies to Korea to serve in one of the NATO, the Allied carriers there. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. It's okay? Oh, I have to tell you this little story. This is also from Stu Soward's. God, it was fun. So I'm going to have to, no, I won't use a 3-finger trick. So there's a photograph. Pardon?
A little louder.
I'm sorry, okay.
Thank you.
The photograph. Let me just speak to the photograph first. You can see Sea Furies on the flight deck of Magnificent preparing for takeoff, and the hour of the day is dawn. The front, the Sea Fury in the front, its right wheel is sitting on the center line of the flight deck. There are crew members, the hands of the ship, holding the chocks to make sure the aircraft don't move. And the controlling officer has a wand to signal which aircraft is to go first. So I have to read this. This is attributed to Ron Heath, the chap on the top right. He was the CEO of that squadron. Now we're in the Mediterranean, and it's October '52. So warm, nice weather. October in the Mediterranean is nice. So a Sea Fury range at dawn. Shadowy hands clutching the chocks. Exhaust stubs rosy red. The wands beckoning. Right wheel in the center line. Stick all the way back. Fingers clenched. Full throttle. All needles up. Green on. Off brakes. Lift. Jig. Up here. Flaps. 130 knots. 20,000 feet. 7 Sea Furies behind. The wind out of Tripoli. The sun rising over Cyprus. Below, Malta, Lampedusa, Sicily, and off to the east, the USS Wasp with a belly full of bearcats who are going to catch hell when we catch them at the right altitude. God, it was fun. It gives you some idea of what flying a Sea Fury was like in 1952. But it was not all fun. Here is Bob Falls. Messed up a landing. He's gone into the barrier on the top left, and he didn't get hurt, so he survived that. And below is David Tate with an engine failure, diving straight into the sea. And David Tate has the absolute distinction of being the very first pilot to be rescued by a helicopter at sea. There you go. Not all fun. Oh, so we have these new Fireflies also. The Mark IVs arrived with Magnificent, and they were fighter reconnaissance aircraft. That's the one on the left. However, an interesting thing happened. In 1949, NATO was formed, and Canada would become part of NATO, and it was decreed that Canada's contribution to NATO would be a Navy which was going to be 100% anti-submarine. That was our only function in life. Why? Because the Soviet submarine fleet, by this time, had reached about 600 submarines, and they had nuclear capabilities, certainly nuclear strike capabilities. And the world was a very, very edgy place to be, as we'll see a little later. So what did Canadian Navy do? Oh, it's simple. we would ship the Firefly 4s back to England and get ourselves some Mark 5s, which were designed for anti-submarine warfare. So it was exchanged for one type of Firefly for another type of Firefly. However, even when we got the Fireflies, the AS5s, they proved to be a big disappointment. They couldn't carry much of a payload, they couldn't carry very many sonobuoys, and by 1950, the US Navy paid off its whole Avenger fleet. So we'll come to the Avengers in a little while. But anyway, we bought 125 of them. They're dirt cheap, they were very good airplanes, and we got rid of the Fireflies. Of some interest, Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum in Hamilton has a Firefly, that one there, and I've flown in it, in the back seat. It's quite a thrill. 2,000 horsepower Griffin engine in front. Quite an experience. So the Avengers arrived in 1950. They arrived in US Navy Midnight Blue. We put them into service right away and slowly converted them to anti-submarine aircraft. We did all kinds of interesting things. Some of the Avengers had, is there a pointer? Well, it's a good idea. Sorry. The second aircraft, the second Avenger on the right that looks like it's pregnant, was called a Guppy. It carries a huge radar scanner underneath the belly. It was designed for the US Navy towards the end of the war, and its purpose was to fly high and allow the radar to see over the horizon. That's how the Americans avoided some of the kamikazes that were coming in 1945. So it's an airborne radar, and not only is it an airborne radar, but if you can see the little pokey antenna on the top of the fin, that antenna is used to radio the radar signal down to the ships. So not only can the aircraft see far over the horizon, but that signal goes into a ship. And I remember when I was in the Navy, I could take a radar display and a big switch on one side, and I could put it to local, or I could put it to airborne radar, and then I could see what the aircraft was seeing far over the horizon. So it was extremely effective. And we did all kinds of things with the Avengers, with various electronic countermeasures, and so on. And anyway, the last point, Canadian Warplane Heritage was just finished after a 10-year project. It's Avenger, which we bought 10 years ago, and hopefully it'll be flying in the spring. So the Avengers have a special place. They contributed to what in the Navy terms was called the fabulous 50s. It was the beginning of a long transition from fumbling to becoming a super efficient airborne anti-submarine force. Our aviators really did excel in the skill of hunting submarines. Well, a short diversion. In 1952, our Queen Elizabeth, became the reigning monarch. And in June of 1953, there was the coronation review of Spithead in the Solent in southern England. And as a boy, I lived about 5 miles away. Does that work? Oh, thank you. 5 miles away. So I personally witnessed this. So there is magnificent. There were 120 ships at anchor for the coronation review. British ships, Canada sent Maggie, Quebec a cruiser, Ontario cruiser, Sioux a destroyer, Leroy's and Swansea frigates, and 2 air squadrons. So there's magnificent in Carrier Row. You can see aircraft carriers as far as the eye can see. And a flypast took place, 300 aircraft, including our 12 Avengers flying overhead, led by somebody we already met, Bill Atkinson, now a lieutenant commander. One interesting thing was that Bill Atkinson, having finished the fly past, was randomly picked as one of the pilots, I think there were 10 or 15, who were helicoptered to join Prince Philip for a cocktail party. So this is the story that comes from Atkinson's memoir. So there he is, Atkinson, comes up to, now Prince Philip was a lieutenant in the Royal Navy. Now lieutenant, two stripes. But however, now Philip is wearing the uniform of an admiral of the fleet. So that's one broad stripe, 4 thin ones, and the last stripe on a naval uniform has a curl called the executive curl. That's about around Philip's elbow. Now, Philip has just finished flying in a little chipmunk trainer, and that gave him his wings. So, for a naval flyer, the wings are worn on the left sleeve immediately above the curl. Okay, so if you're a lieutenant, well, be about there. But for Philip, it's somewhere around his elbow. So Atkinson comes up to Prince Philip and says, "Sir, congratulations, sir, on your wings." "Thank you," says Philip. Atkinson, being a bit of a joker, said, "Now, can you give us any advice for us younger officers on how to improve our chances of promotion, since obviously you, sir, have done very well?" And Philip said, "Get yourself a queen."
You did? Yeah.
We're still in 1953. This also comes from Stu Sowry, and it became known as the Great Fog Incident. So what's happening? Operation Mariner is ongoing. It's a NATO exercise with 300 ships, the largest NATO exercise ever mounted at that point. Maggie is part of the group of Carrier Division 2 under an Admiral Goodwin, U.S. Navy, together with 2 American carriers, the Bennington and the Wasp. Everybody's heading northwards towards Iceland in the far distance. At 11:30, a Striker 52 aircraft is launched. However, we are approximately where the Labrador Current meets the Gulf Stream, and so we got mixing of warm water and cold water, and the fog develops, heavy fog. At 14:20, Admiral Goodwin recalls all aircraft. However, now ceiling and visibility are 0. So an order goes out to jettison all stores. In other words, anything that you've got on board that you don't need to keep flying, drop it. So that's sonobuoys or any other things, except fuel, don't drop that. 10 aircraft managed to get down, but that left 42 aloft. 42 aircraft, 65 souls, 9 Avengers, Canadian Avengers, 27 souls. Greenland, 450 miles is too far. At 1700, the submarine USS Redfin, which is 100 miles north, radios that the ceiling is 100 feet, not very high. The visibility is 2 nautical miles, not very far. And the seas are 12 foot. Now, when I flew float planes, I did ditching drills, and I can tell you that ditching into 12-foot seas is a bad idea. At 1725, Admiral Goodwin ordered a mass ditching of all aircraft close to the Redfin. Now that would be a neat thing to watch, 42 aircraft all ditching next to this poor submarine. At 1710, there is a slight lifting of the fog. The sun, however, has set, and here's the problem. Some of the pilots have never done a night landing. You have to be night qualified to do a night landing. And this chap here, Ken Meikle, he did a night landing. And I can tell you that I've never landed an aircraft carrier. However, I have, on one occasion, at Buttonville Airport, carried out an emergency wheels-up landing at night. And I won't bore you with the details of how that all happened or why it happened, but when the realization hits you that this is what you have to do, there's a sort of like a special hand that takes hold. And for the next 20 minutes, I delivered the absolutely best flying I probably ever did in my life. And everything was cool and calm, and decisions were made and carried out. And then I brought the aircraft down to the runway and skidded and stopped. I switched off the engine, all switches off belt, out the door, and then it hit. I could not stand because my two knees were going like jackhammers. They were absolutely, it's just not possible to stand. And I bet you the same thing happened to him when he landed. I bet you it was just like that for him. At any rate, to finish the story, at 1828, with all estimated fueling long gone, the aircraft were all down, including an American Skyraider strike aircraft on Maggie. And by 1830, the visibility back to zero, the little patch of warm water, long way astern. So, the young man who landed on Maggie, he was an American ensign, Jim Elster. Now, on the American carriers, which are dry, they served medicinal brandy to the aircrew, just to steady their nerves. Now, Maggie was not dry. And in Maggie's wardroom saw a party like no other when all the aircrew were on board. And Admiral Rayner, who, by the way, was a teetotaler, saw fit to donate a whole case of Scotch whiskey to the wardroom just to help things along. And so the next morning, this photograph was taken the next day. That's Commander Air. So he's the air boss for the carrier. He's the senior pilot. So he's giving a little gift to young Elster before his takeoff. Now it's probable that Elster's blood alcohol level was sufficiently high to provide enough fumes for his Skyraider to fly all the way to Bennington with no more fuel. At any rate, the other thing that was interesting, while Elster was enjoying his few hours in the wardroom with the Canadian flyers, somebody down in the hangar managed to put a red maple leaf right on his stars and bars and read Maggie underneath. And the story goes that in spite of the fact that this Skyraider stayed in U.S. Navy service for a few more years, nobody ever painted it over. It was just a badge of honor. And anyway, lots of fun. So by 1954, how am I doing for time?
I just wanted to say if anybody needs to leave, please feel free. It's 10 to 2 now. But you keep going as long as, how much more time?
Maybe 10 or 15.
10 or 15 minutes. So it's up to you. If you need to leave, feel free.
So by 54, the die was cast as to what was going to happen in the 60s. Canada had bought this ship, which was HMS Powerful, a sister ship of Magnificent, and converted it to this, HMCS Bonaventure, by the addition of all the new design features like an angled deck, steam catapult, mirror landing site, to allow the Bonaventure to operate jet fighters. That was the plan. And also, we had ordered Banshee jet fighters, 60 of them, we ordered 60 Banshee jet fighters, and the manufacturer promised to keep the production line going. But guess what? The Canadian government reneged on the contract, the production line was closed, and we ended up with 39 heavily used Banshees with only about 1,000 hours of airtime left in them. We also chose the Grumman Tracker to replace the Avenger, and it was to be built under license at de Havilland Aircraft in Downsview, just up the road. And we bought one tracker and built 99 more, so we had 100 trackers. Both the Brits and the Americans told us we were totally stupid to operate jet fighters from that little Bonaventure. It was far too small, and the safety margins would be zero. So 55 of the Banshees arrived. There's our friend Bob Falls. He's in command of 870 Squadron. He's showing the admirals around. There's Bob Falls with his fighter boys. There's an 870 Squadron Banshee with the blue and white triangles on the tail, and the other squadron, 871, with the red and white squares. That was headed by a man called Jeff Harvey. The Banshee carried a missile that was brand new, a heat-seeking missile called the Sidewinder. The tracker arrived in '56, the first one, and it was a huge advance over the Avenger. 2 engines, 2 pilots, 2 sensor operators, good radar, all kinds of electronics, and a high payload, and it was almost as effective. The last trackers were almost as effective as the Air Force's Argus aircraft. So, April of '57, Bonnie had commissioned, done her sea trials, and VXM, the experimental squadron, flew 2 Banshees and 2 trackers from Shearwater to St. Hubert, to Goose Bay, to Greenland, to Iceland, to Scotland, and to our in station at Ford for the flight trials. There they are in Greenland. And on the 12th of April, '57, the first aircraft landed on Bonaventure, which was actually a borrowed Seahawk, flown by the Commander Air of Bonaventure, a man by the name of Pop Fotheringham. And there's the first tracker about to land, and the first Banshee, and guess what, in the wardroom? On completion, successful completion of all the flight trials, celebrations. The man in charge, Jim Hunter, Commander Jim Hunter, and I'll skip the name since I'm a little bit time stressed. We met Joe Sosnkowski in the previous talk I gave. So we're now in February of '58, and they were doing carrier qualifications for the 2nd Squadron. And you may recall that Sosnkowski made a successful landing on the Bonaventure in spite of the fact, the wire broke, and Sosnkowski managed to recover and flew his damaged aircraft to the Naval Air Station in Mayport. The deck landings were suspended. All the other Banshees, which were airborne, there were 5 of them, were sent off to Mayport. And 2 days later, the 5 remaining Banshees were to be flown to Bonaventure. But it was foggy. And Barry Troy, Lieutenant Barry Troy, lost contact with the other 4 and ran out of fuel, crashed and died. Fast forward to 2017 and Hurricane Irma. And what happened was this parachute harness washed up on the beach near Jacksonville, Florida. And it says, Lieutenant Troy. And they investigated and confirmed that this was in fact his parachute harness. And it was returned to the Naval Air Station Museum in Shearwater with great pomp and ceremony in 2017. And his family finally knew, confirmed that, that's how he died, although they thought they knew. In '58, we had another aerobatic team flying Banshees. They were called the Grey Ghosts, headed by Wally Walton, Lieutenant Commander. There are 4 Banshees that were flying Bonnie, 4 Banshees that were flying Bonnie. Here doing a starburst, that's where they fly up in formation and they peel off in different directions. There's a starburst going the opposite direction. They're all flying in formation vertically, then do a wing over and do starburst that way. There's Wally Walton. The Alex Fox, who we'll meet a little later. And of some interest, Jeff Craven. So there are 4 aircraft that normally fly in formation, but one of them is a solo. So Jeff Craven did all the showing off, special little bits. And he has recently written a book called Court Martial, which I've read, and it's quite a good read. It's kind of like, it's a novel, and it sort of explains kind of what happened to Admiral Norman. It's a good read. Sonobuoys. This is a little technical, but hang in with me. A sonobuoy is a device used by an aircraft to detect a submarine. It's a tube. It's a tube. It drops in the water. The tube separates. There's a float on top with a radio transmitter. There's a long cable. There is a weight, and down in the bottom compartment, there are transducers and a hydrophone. So the hydrophone can hear the submarine. It makes this, the noise is picked up and it's sent by radio to the aircraft. The aircraft can tell, A, there is a submarine, and B, the direction of the submarine from the sonobuoy. It can't tell how far it is. So in 1956, a special new technique was devised. A very long name, explosive echo ranging. So here's a submarine. You drop a sonobuoy. The aircraft then flies a very tight circle and drops an explosive charge called a practice depth charge by the sonobuoy. Sound travels 5,000 feet per second in water. It goes there, bounces off, comes back. If you time that, you can get the range of the submarine. This is really important. Explosive echo ranging. There is the aircraft that it was trialed on. But there's a problem. Explosive echo ranging is an extremely awkward, cumbersome set of words to mumble and get out. And the trials were being carried out in Key West in Florida. And so the end of the day was usually headed in a bar somewhere. And in this particular nightclub in Key West, it was discovered that Miss Julie Gibson, voila, had the mysterious power